What if a revenge film could transform the usual bloodshed into something truly breathtaking? Silent Night does just that, turning a familiar plot into a stunning visual experience. But what makes the seemingly routine scenes of violence feel so groundbreaking and intimate? Well, when it comes to movies, the term guilty pleasure never really sits right with us. Especially when we're talking about genre films. We believe that whatever we find good or interesting should be treated equally, no matter how it's presented. But with Silent Night, there is a bit of an exception. We find ourselves enjoying it even though we know it's not perfect, and this gives us a bit of a guilty feeling. Often we like to dive deep into films that invite it, but sometimes a movie that seems solid can fall apart under close scrutiny. However, with Silent Night, no matter how much we analyze its flaws, it doesn't reduce our enjoyment. So, what we're left with is a bit of an understanding why we shouldn't really recommend the film, but finding ourselves doing it anyway. Now, Silent Night is directed by John Woo, making his return to Hollywood after 20 years. The plot is pretty straightforward. Brian, played by Joel Kinnaman, seeks revenge against a local gang after their reckless shooting kills his young son on Christmas. To make matters worse, the gang's leader, played by Harold Torres, shoots Brian in the throat, leaving him unable to speak. This sets up a unique storytelling device where the film is almost entirely dialogue-free. We start in the middle of the action with Brian covered in blood and wearing a Christmas sweater, chasing down rival gangs in a high-octane shootout. The film then shifts to Brian and his wife Saya, played by Catalina Sandino Moreno, at the hospital as he recovers. It's only later after they return home that we get the backstory of their son's tragic death. In Silent Night, a lot of the film focuses on Brian's journey to becoming an action hero. Brian starts from scratch and he has to work hard to transform himself into a fighter. Director John Woo really plays with this idea, and Brian's journey is filled with setbacks. Joel Kinnaman has the right physical presence for the role and can pull off a fierce look. He's trying to create a tough guy image, but his efforts often lead to mistakes that make each fight scene unpredictable. Watching a character who looks like an action hero but isn't perfect at it can be entertaining in a revenge thriller. However, there's a bit of a storytelling hiccup. The film kicks off with Brian already in full action hero mode before he's done any of the training. This choice puts style over substance early on, which makes the film's opening feel a bit off compared to the rest of the story. It sets up an expectation of Brian being a cool, capable fighter, even though he's supposed to be learning as he goes along. Now, this movie might have a plot so predictable it feels like it's been around since the dawn of time, but it stands out as one of his best works and one of the most visually stunning movies of the year. It really proves that how a story is told can be more important than the story itself. In this film, no one speaks a single word of dialogue. Characters make noises when they're in pain, like grunting or screaming. We hear sound effects like the wind, rain, and footsteps, and a mix of pop songs and Marco Beltrami's emotional, over-the-top score. But actual conversations don't happen. Characters communicate through looks or by being lost in their own thoughts. While the lack of dialogue might sound like a gimmick, it actually fits well with the film's action-packed nature. Most of the time, the characters are too busy fighting each other with everything from guns and knives to cars and motorcycles. They're also seen plotting, training, and perfecting their fighting skills. In Silent Night, the action speaks louder than words, and that's what makes it such a gripping and visually dynamic experience. The film also uses lighting shifts to signal flashbacks, switching to warm, yellow tones to show when Brian is remembering past events. This technique helps us feel the emotional weight of Brian's grief and injury, painting his world as dark and sunless. These visual touches are part of what keeps us engaged, even if the story itself feels like it might have lost us. Joel Kinnaman also plays a big role in keeping the film together. His physical and expressive acting style brings a lot of emotional depth to his character. He's really good at showing the pain and struggle in his fight scenes, which makes them more compelling. His performance adds a layer of emotional clarity that helps balance out the film's more stylized elements. But it's easy to get frustrated with Silent Night if we try to take its dramatic elements too seriously, especially given some of the early choices that seem to invite that kind of scrutiny. But honestly, how serious is the film about its own drama? Even though we've praised Woo's and Kinnaman's efforts, it's worth noting that the film's experiment with having almost no dialogue doesn't quite hit the mark. Brian is the only character who feels fully developed, and everyone else is either a vague sketch or disappointingly shallow. The film's portrayal of women and Kid Cudi's role as Detective Vassal lacked depth, making them seem almost irrelevant. Detective Vassal's lack of presence feels deliberate at first, but it becomes a problem when his character doesn't evolve beyond just watching events unfold. The action scenes are clear and well executed, but the emotional core of the film doesn't hold up. Brian's constant flashbacks to his son's death, even during fight scenes, start to feel more silly than meaningful. The filmmakers try to use this emotional element to drive the story, but it ends up feeling forced. The relationship between Brian and his son is barely explored beyond the surface level, so it's hard to feel genuinely invested in it. The film's take on revenge is pretty straightforward, with no real nuance. By the end of Silent Night, Brian's struggles with his mission are pretty much resolved, and there's no question that the gang members are shown as completely deserving of their violent fate. This black and white view on revenge could easily frustrate us if we're looking for deeper drama, especially given how the film sets itself up. There's a moment when Brian, deciding on his path of violence, actually writes "Kill them all" on December 24th on his calendar, as if scheduling an appointment. This adds a bit of absurdity to his quest for revenge. In another scene, while choking someone, he has a vision of his son. You might expect this to be a moment where he questions his choices or has a moral awakening, but instead, he just chokes harder. Now, John Woo has always excelled in creating visually dynamic action scenes, but in this movie, there's a new level of focus and intimacy in his approach. This film feels like John Woo unplugged, stripping down the grandeur to something more personal and refined. Instead of relying on massive flashy setups, Woo crafts individual shots that are stunning for their simplicity and precision. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.